Lincoln's MKX crossover seems to confuse some people that are shopping in this luxury crossover segment. This is not really the direct competitor to the BMW X3, the Volvo XC60, or the recently renamed Mercedes-Benz GLK. The real Lincoln competitor to those small luxury crossovers is actually the smaller Lincoln MKC. The MKX is notably larger than those crossovers, and this is aimed squarely at the Lexus RX. Like the Lexus RX, the MKX is a large two-row crossover. That means you don't find a row right back here in the back of the vehicle like you do find in the Volvo XC90 in most versions or the Acura MDX. As you'd expect for a luxury vehicle of this size, we start out with more features than we find in some of those compact crossovers. For instance, these HID headlamps with LED strips in them are actually standard in the MKX. This does not start out with halogen high beams. You can option your way up into full LED headlamps, but even these base headlamps steer in the corners. Over the last few years, Lincoln has definitely been playing with their design language, and they seem to have settled on this slightly smaller grille than we see in some of the other Lincolns still on the market. This is definitely more attractive than those large baleen whale style grilles that we've seen earlier. A nice touch is that the radar adaptive cruise control sensor is very well integrated right down here at the bottom of the bumper. Also a nice touch, the 360-degree front view camera is well hidden behind the Lincoln logo. At 190 inches long, the MKX is almost exactly the same size as the brand new Cadillac XT5. The Cadillac XT5 and the MKX are both aimed squarely at the 2016 Lexus RX 350, which is actually about 2.5 inches longer. If you look closely at the profiles of the Cadillac, the Lexus, and the Lincoln, you'll notice why the Lexus is a tiny bit longer. We actually have slightly longer bumper overhangs front and rear than we find in the Cadillac and the Lincoln. That means that all three of these vehicles are just about the same size on the inside. And that same size is notably larger on the inside than you'll find in something like a BMW X5. Even though the X5 is about 2.5 inches longer than this, the reason you find more space inside this cabin is right up front, because we get a hood that is a little bit shorter than we see in the X5. Because the X5 starts out as a rear-wheel drive vehicle, the engine placement under the hood means that the overall exterior to interior ratio is not quite as efficient as we see in the Lexus, the Lincoln right here, or in the brand new Cadillac. Lincoln has gone for a relatively restrained and elegant style in the back of the MKX. You'll notice we have these very well integrated exhaust tips right here in the lower portion of the bumper, parking sensors right back here, reflectors in this section, and then the tail lamp modules have this light strip that actually joins them across the back in the hatch. For 2016, there are two different engines offered in the MKX. Things start out with a 3.7-liter V6 engine that's a little bit larger than you'll find in the Lexus RX. It produces 303 horsepower and 278 pound-feet of torque. Optional is this engine right here, which is a twin-turbo 2.7-liter V6 engine. This is closely related to what we see in the Ford F-150 pickup truck, although the power output levels are a little bit different when used in this vehicle. The horsepower figure may not sound like a huge bump at 335 horsepower, but this produces more than 100 pound-feet of torque more than that 3.7-liter base engine. That means this is significantly faster than the base 3.7-liter V6 model. Also interesting is that both engines are mated to a standard 6-speed automatic transmission and front-wheel drive. That means you can get a vehicle with nearly 400 foot-pounds of torque and just front-wheel drive if you so desire. All-wheel drive is optional on both engines, and that will set you back just under $2,500. Front seat comfort ranges from excellent to unbelievable in the MKX. We have the unbelievable model right here, which does use a 22-way power adjustable driver's seat. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column and a massage feature in addition to the heating and ventilation. I'm going to go ahead and scoot this seat further forward so you can see what's going on with this seat back right here. Not only do we have inflatable bolsters in this seat, we also have four-way adjustable lumbar support, and the four-way adjustable lumbar support is done a little bit differently in the MKX than we see in the other luxury options. This seat uses 3 different air bladders, positioned one right down here towards the bottom of the seat, one in the middle, and one a little bit higher up the back. Now that's not too unusual. A lot of luxury cars use 3 different airbags in the seat, or air bladders, to provide that 4-way adjustable lumbar support. However, most of those cars out there don't allow individual control of those air bladders. Instead, what most options do out there is if you press the four-way adjustable lumbar support control in the down position, it actually inflates the bottom bolster and then deflates the other two. If you press it forward, it actually inflates the middle one, deflates the other two. You basically repeat the same process for the upper bladder as well. That's not going on in this seat. In this seat, you can actually independently control all three air bladders if you want to. You can have the middle one completely deflated, the bottom one and the top one inflated, or in any combination that you can think of. We also have the ability to change the curvature of this seat back. So if you notice, I'm pressing the control forward and the seat is becoming a little bit more curved. This is a feature that you also see in current BMW models, and Lincoln has now done it at a lower price point than we find in most of the competition. This is, of course, in addition to the air bladders that are actually in the seat bottom cushion itself, which do provide an anti-fatigue function, and of course, the extending thigh cushion. Combined with the power tilt telescopic steering column and the 3-position seat memory, if you can't find a comfortable seating position in the MKX, you're probably not human. Although there's no passenger seat memory like we do find in certain Mercedes or BMW models, it has the same range of motion as the driver's seat, which means it's also the most comfortable passenger seat in this category. As I said, the MKX is a step above something like a Volvo XC60, BMW X3, or Audi Q5 in terms of overall size. That's very obvious right back here in the back seat, because I have about 4 or 5 inches of legroom back here sitting right here behind myself, and that's definitely more than you'd find in those European options. I also get a very generous amount of headroom, even though we do have the optional panoramic roof in this model, and that does decrease headroom just a little bit. Moving over to the middle seat, I have an enormous amount of headroom. It actually goes up, not down like we see in some of those models, and because of the design of the MKX, we don't have a very large hump right here. It only goes up about an inch or so versus the outboard seating positions. Moving all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, and I still have about 2 inches of legroom left there. These rear seats also recline. There's a little lever right over here on the side, has a quite reclined motion there, and you can also put them in a very upright position, which helps square off the cargo area. As we see in other Ford and Lincoln models, we also have optional inflatable belts for rear seat passengers. This helps reduce the chest loads, especially on women, children, and people with weaker bone structures. Behind this tailgate, you'll find about 7 cubic feet more space than you'll find in the brand new Cadillac XT5, and about 8 cubic feet more than the brand new Lexus RX 350. That's even before you take a look under this cargo area load floor. You'll notice we have a little bit of extra storage space, and we also have a spare tire right under there, which you don't find in all of those European options. The large dimensions of this cargo area and the fact that we even have an optional helper handle, even though we do have the power tailgate in our vehicle, give this 10 out of 10 points when it comes to my exclusive truck comfort index. The model that we've been driving does have the optional panoramic sunroof, which does extend right there over the rear seats. We have height adjustable seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger. And of course, our model does have, as I said, the optional multi-way adjustable driver and passenger seat. Moving over to the front doors, we find mostly soft touch plastics, as you'd expect for a luxury vehicle, although you will find some hard plastics right there inside that storage bin. The upper portions of the dashboard and the front doors are after stitched to give it the impression of a stitched dashboard and stitched door treatment. And of course, we have open pore wood trim in our model. As you'd expect in a luxury vehicle, we have soft touch plastics on the upper portion of the dashboard and the lower portion as well. You'll find the glove box open button right over here in the center console. It is a moderately sized bin style arrangement, was not able to fit a large tablet computer inside. Even though the glove compartment is a little smaller than I expected, we do have a 2-tiered storage area right here in the center console, made possible by the drivetrain design in the MKX. We also see something similar going on in the MKZ. You can very easily stick large items in either of those 2 storage areas. Our model has the optional Revel audio system, so we do have a center channel speaker right up there. You'll find the gear selector for the automatic transmission in this button bank right over here on the left side of the infotainment and navigation screen. Push the button for whatever gear you want to be in, drive, neutral, reverse, park, or the sport mode right back there. In the center, we have a touchscreen infotainment system. If you want to know more about this software, there is a separate review on my channel as well. This is basically the same software that we've seen out of Lincoln for some time, still right here in the same cabin. On the right side of the screen, we have a camera button, which does show you your 360-degree camera, or the front view camera, or the back view camera, depending on what drive mode you're in. So if we switch to the drive mode, you'll see that changes right there. We also have the autonomous parking option, parking sensor enable disable, and the hazard light button. Below that, we have a single slot optical disc player, the engine start-stop button over here, brake hold, glove box button right there, the controls for our dual zone climate control along with our heated and ventilated seats. You'll find duplicates of the seat heating and ventilation right up here in the infotainment system. This is the only place where you will find the button to heat the steering wheel. Continuing down, we have a storage cubby which opens to reveal a USB input, the SD card slot for that navigation database, and definitely enough room to put large smartphones like an iPhone 6 right there. You can also put wallets, other things inside that cubby. Between that storage cubby and the center armrest, we have two very large cup holders with ambient lighting rings inside. Moving to the back of that, we have a large center console, which is again made possible by the drivetrain design in the Lincoln. We have one storage divider here that lifts up out of the way to reveal a very large and deep well where I have a bag of various things, another USB input, and again, this is quite deep. On the driver's side, we have a partial LCD instrument cluster that's very similar to what we see in the Lincoln MKZ as well. Most of what you're seeing is actually an LCD, although we do have large physical elements as well. So this ring that runs right around the speedometer right here with the numbers on it, and that would actually be the mile-per-hour numbers only, is actually a physical ring. However, this kilometer-per-hour scale on the inside, as well as the actual needle for the gauge, that's actually an LCD. We also have an LCD right down here for the fuel gauge. This portion right down here with our gear indicator is an LCD, and then we have this large rectangular section which starts right over here and gives you your infotainment and navigation information all the way to the center of the tachometer. That's all an LCD as well. Then again, on the left side, like we saw on the right, this ring right around here is a physical ring. Now things do get a little bit different than other Lincolns right over here on the very right of this display inside the speedometer, because this portion is not independently configurable. We have the lane monitoring system right there. We enable and disable the lane monitoring and we get that needle out of the system, but you can't really directly change the way that section looks or what is actually contained in it. So it contains your cruise control information, your lane information, that sort of thing. That's not adjustable. So the right button on the steering wheel actually controls sort of the center of this display. We have the navigation option there, we have entertainment, we have phone as well. The left side of the display is a little bit more interactive. This is where we can adjust vehicle settings like our cruise control, cross traffic system, traction control. We can actually also see the status of our all-wheel drive system. It'll show you where the power is going. The steering wheel is almost a three-spoke design. We have this sort of split spoke at the bottom with real wood trim on there. This is open pore wood trim like we see in some of the European options. Shift paddles on the back of the steering wheel, up on the right and down on the left. Below the control modules that I showed you earlier, you'll find the controls for your audio system over here on the right. Volume up, down, mute, voice command, track forward, backward. These also double as hang-up pickup buttons for the phone. And then on the left side of the steering wheel, we find the controls for our radar adaptive cruise control system. On, off, resume, we have set, up and down, then of course we have the distance increase and decrease buttons. The first thing you'll notice out on the road is how much peppier the MKX is versus the competition that is most direct. And again, I am really talking about the Cadillac, the Lexus, and perhaps the Acura RDX. The base V6 in the Lincoln isn't just more powerful than the competition, it has more torque than something like the Lexus RX 350, and that really compensates for the fact that this has two fewer gears in its transmission than the Lexus does. In our twin-turbo tester that we've been driving this week, we ran from 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds, and that is a decent amount faster than that Lexus RX 350. Now you can get the Lexus RX Hybrid, which does produce more power than this model, and it will go from 0 to 60 a hair faster, but it's actually a fairly small difference. It's only 0.2 of a second faster than this twin-turbo model. If you were expecting the Lincoln to float like a marshmallow and drive and handle like a big heavy Lincoln of the past, then you'll actually be a little bit disappointed, because even though this has an excellent ride, this accelerates faster than most of the competition, and it also stops faster than most of the competition. We ran from 60 to 0 in 118 feet, which is absolutely excellent in this vehicle. This actually stops shorter than something like a Honda Accord, even though this is a large crossover. The tire choice doesn't just help braking, it also helps the handling score, and this definitely outhandles the Lexus RX. This also handles better than a variety of European options because this is actually lighter than the BMW X5 or the Mercedes-Benz GLE. So even though something like a BMW X5 has a better weight balance than the MKX, that doesn't mean it will necessarily handle better than the MKX. Now there are a large number of BMW X5 models out there on the dealer lot with much wider tires than we find in this model. They'll obviously handle better than the MKX as well. But if you're taking a look at base versions of the MKX versus base versions of the BMW X5, you'll actually be surprised that the MKX can actually road hold just a little bit better. Now on the downside, the feel in the MKX is definitely soft. The suspension, especially when we're in the comfort mode of this adaptive suspension, is awfully soft compared to most of the competition. And that means that even though this actually hugs the road very well, the feel is a little bit unusual. It definitely feels a little bit floaty-boaty out on the road. On the flip side, obviously this gets an A+ when it comes to the ride score. Now again, I do find the comfort mode to be a little too floaty-boaty for my tastes, although it would be excellent for long highway trips. I actually found that the normal mode was an acceptable balance of body roll, tip and dive, as well as handling ability. When it comes to my final comments on handling, this does get sort of a split score because I think in terms of overall grip, this unquestionably gets an A, but in terms of overall feel, I'm actually going to give this a B-. This can feel a little bit too floaty-boaty at times for my tastes, and the steering feels somewhat disconnected. Of course, we have electric power steering in basically every option out there, but the Lincoln MKX is particularly numb when it comes to the steering. The MKX scored 68 decibels in our cabin noise test, which makes this one of the quietest vehicles that we have ever tested, not just one of the quietest vehicles in this category. This beats not just the Lexus RX 350 when it comes to cabin noise, but also the BMW X5, which was previously one of the quietest vehicles we had tested. I was actually a little bit surprised by that because generally when we have grippy tires in all four corners like we have in this vehicle, we get more road noise. And that really just shows the dedication that Lincoln applied to the sound deadening in this cabin. You probably notice up there at the top of your screen that the MKX is scoring very well across the board so far, but when it comes to fuel economy, this actually drops below the majority of the competition, and I'm going to give this a C. We have been averaging about 19.1 miles per gallon over about 500 miles of very mixed driving. That is notably below basically every other entry in this segment. You'll get better fuel economy in something like a BMW X5. You'll actually get similar fuel economy in a BMW X5 with their twin-turbo V8 that's going to be faster than this. The reason for that fuel economy is likely this 6-speed automatic transmission and the eagerness with which this all-wheel drive system sends power to the rear. The MKX definitely does not use a slip and grip style all-wheel drive system, so this does not wait until there is front wheel slip to send power to the rear. This is always sending some power to the rear. Even when we're driving this vehicle gently out here on this winding mountain road, it actually is sending nearly 50% of the power to the rear most of the time. That gives this vehicle a very different feel whether you buy it in front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive form, because if you buy this in the all-wheel drive form, it actually feels an awful lot closer in terms of driving dynamics to the all-wheel drive versions of the BMW X5. Now this will never overdrive the rear wheels like we see in the Acura MDX, however it does send 50% of the power to the rear quite often and quite aggressively. As we've come to expect from Lincoln, pricing on the MKX is a little bit lower than the competition, but it's not as aggressive as we used to see out of Lincoln. There are a few different reasons for that, of course. Lincoln is trying to elevate their brand in terms of prestige, but they've also loaded the MKX with more content than we saw in the past. I've received a number of emails lately from people asking why the MKX has become so expensive, and my actual answer to them back has been, it isn't. You're just comparing it to perhaps the wrong option out there. Because at $38,260, this is decently less expensive than a base Lexus RX 350 at $41,900. The MKX is also a hair less expensive than the brand new Cadillac XT5, which starts at $38,995, and notably less expensive than a BMW X5 or Mercedes-Benz GLE, which all start over $51,000. However, this is just about the same size as all of those options. The model that we've been testing this week is a very nicely loaded 2.7-liter twin-turbo model, and it stickers just around $58,000. If I were shopping for an MKX, there are a few must-have options in my book. The EcoBoost engine, which our model has, is $2,000. That's a must-have option. That also means that I would definitely include the $2,500 optional all-wheel drive system. This is an awful lot of power to be sending just to the front wheels, and if you had the all-wheel drive system, it really changes the way this vehicle behaves out on the road. It improves the handling, it improves the feel, definitely improves the grip as well. The other must-have option in the MKX for me would be these optional $1,200 22-way power adjustable seats. That actually is a pretty good price for a seat that is this adjustable and this comfortable. Let's tackle the elephant in the room first, the Lexus RX, because it is not only the best seller in this segment, it's the biggest direct competitor to the MKX. It also is the easiest to discuss because the MKX is quite simply a better crossover in just about every way. The only real area where the Lexus RX excels over the MKX is in fuel economy. You will definitely get better fuel economy in the RX 350 or the RX Hybrid. However, in just about every other way, the MKX excels over the RX, and it actually beats Lexus at the typical Lexus game. This actually gives you a softer, quieter highway ride while simultaneously giving you better handling and better acceleration than we see over there in the Lexus RX. There are more luxury features going on the inside, and I actually think the interior looks slightly better put together than most versions of the RX. Lexus does offer that large format LCD infotainment system in the dashboard, and it is a gorgeous display, but the software that drives it is actually still one step behind this My Lincoln Touch system that we're seeing in this cabin. Lincoln has said that they will be using the new Sync system in Lincoln models, but we haven't seen it in the MKX yet. It may happen next year or so. We really don't know when that will be. That said, however, I would still take this infotainment software over what we see in the Lexus RX 350. When it comes to pricing, the MKX does start a little bit lower than the Lexus RX 350, but when you start adding options onto the vehicle, they're going to be very comparably priced. This will still be a hair less expensive than a Lexus RX. You're likely to find a slightly better deal on it on dealer lots because Lincoln dealers are a little bit more likely to negotiate with you than the Lexus dealer, but they are priced very, very similarly. Now that said, when we start taking a look at mid-level or top-end trims of the Lexus and the Lincoln really starts to distinguish itself. Even the base Lincoln has more power than we see over there in the Lexus. Fuel economy is not quite as good, but I'm actually willing to trade that for the extra power and the better engine note that we get in the Lincoln. Building on that, as you start working your way up the Lexus pricing ladder, the Lincoln actually gets a little bit better because you can get the 2.7-liter twin-turbo engine for the same price as those mid-level and top-level trims over there on the Lexus side. You're definitely getting more power and more performance out of the Lincoln than you'll get out of the Lexus. Obviously, you will be trading some of that fuel economy we do see in the Lexus RX 350 or especially the RX 450 Hybrid. However, this is actually slightly faster than a BMW X5 with their 3-liter turbocharged engine. A strong selling point of the Lexus brand in general has been reliability. However, keep in mind that Cadillac and Lincoln are actually close behind Lexus in the reliability game and generally considered more reliable than your average European luxury option. So if you're shopping for something and reliability is important to you, that actually is a reason to consider a Lincoln or a Cadillac. Now on the downside, some of the fit and finish that we see on the outside of the Lincoln is a little bit below the Lexus. So the way some of the panel gaps fit, the way certain things actually bolt together on the vehicle, it's not done with the same precision that we do see in the Lexus or in the European competition, but when it actually comes to reliability, Lincoln and Cadillac are actually quite good. Speaking of the Cadillac, we have that brand new XT5. It's actually going to be a little bit more expensive than this vehicle depending on how you configure it. We aren't going to get quite the same cargo capacity in the back. It is about 7 cubic feet smaller right here behind the hatch, and the seats aren't quite as comfortable as we see in the Lincoln. I personally like the exterior styling of that new Cadillac a little bit more than the Lincoln MKX on the outside and on the inside. But when it comes to luxury and comfort, I think the Lincoln beats the Cadillac even though the Cadillac is a little bit newer. You may have heard that Cadillac cut an awful lot of weight out of their crossover when it made the transition from the SRX to the new XT5. However, as much weight as that vehicle has saved, this is actually right around the same curb weight, and both of them are lighter than something like a BMW X5 or a Mercedes-Benz GLE. That may surprise some people, because even though this starts out as a front-wheel drive vehicle and in the form that we're testing here, it's all-wheel drive, in some circumstances this actually may outhandle a BMW X5, depending on how the BMW is configured. The reason for that is down to the curb weight. Now obviously when it comes to handling feel, the Lexus, the Lincoln, and the Cadillac don't really have anything on a rear-wheel drive X5 or a Mercedes-Benz GLE. In those forms, those vehicles definitely are going to feel more connected to the driver. Of course, you will definitely pay more for that handling feel in the BMW. It's going to set you back at least $6,000 more than the model we've been testing here. You can find more luxury options in the BMW. However, you're going to pay even more than that $6,000 if you want those options. Regardless of the options checked, however, I actually found the MKX's front seats to be more comfortable than anything available from BMW in the X5. The Mercedes-Benz GLE starts a little bit less expensive than that X5 at $51,100. However, it's going to be significantly slower than a base MKX. So comparably equipped, the Mercedes is going to be just about as expensive as that BMW X5. The X5 and the GLE are not really the same kind of vehicle, however. This starts out as a front-wheel drive vehicle, those start out as rear-wheel drive vehicles, and they have very different driving dynamics out on the road. The GLE and the X5 are a little bit less efficient in terms of interior packaging, so you'll definitely find more room in this cabin than you'll find in the X5 or the GLE. However, the BMW and the Mercedes have higher towing capacities. They're a little bit closer to a traditional SUV, even though they too are crossovers. They just happen to be rear-wheel drive crossovers, and this is a front-wheel drive crossover. Whether or not the additional brand cachet, towing capacity, etc. is worth it to you really is a very personal choice. But if your answer isn't between $6,000 and $15,000, then you have your answer. Take a look at the Lincoln MKX. Other comparisons tend to be quite similar. The Acura RDX is almost the same size as the MKX, but it's not nearly as nice on the inside. You don't get the same kind of feature content, the same kind of power, same kind of driving dynamics that we find here. However, it is going to be notably less expensive, especially than the model we've been testing right here. So the same sort of thing applies to the Lincoln that I just mentioned over there for the BMW and the Mercedes-Benz. You have to decide how much these additional luxury features are worth to you. And if the answer isn't that same sort of price delta, then the Acura perhaps is a better fit. And there you have it. That's been our detailed look at the 2016 Lincoln MKX. My bottom line is, if you're shopping for a Lexus RX 350, go ahead and buy an MKX instead. I think you'll be happier with it than the Lexus overall. Be sure to check out those related videos down there across the bottom of your screen. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Like this video, comment on the video. You can also donate to Alex Autos by clicking down there on our page and finding it somewhere. A lot of people have been asking about that lately, so you can go ahead and find that if you would like to. You can also visit our brand new website at alexonautos.com. It has been redesigned, but I will apologize in advance that I haven't been able to respond to everybody that has been putting in new car requests on that website. Hopefully we'll get to that sooner or later. I'll see you next week.